area. Sandy is here because she had the unfortunate happenstance about 4 days before Christmas of last year, getting a phone call from Keith's fine people early in the morning that said, basically, your office is burning down. Now, I'm overemphasizing because it had crawled through the attic and stayed contained, finally made it through the roof. So when I met with her, I literally met with her in her temporary office outside the building they're rebuilding. So she's unfortunately living through that right now. Ms. Sue Phelan is, and I'm going to say this like you kind of gave to, she's a naturalized citizen from Jamaica who moved to Texas in 79 after graduating with a BS in economics from the Wharton School in the University of Pennsylvania. And then she says, I wasn't born here, but I got here as fast as I could. So it's good to have her here. Now, she represents an unusual approach to this because she is with SCORE, which is one of the largest volunteering mentoring organizations in the United States. Honestly, I had to go look it up too and see who it is. She has worked with them now for 14 years, and she is a certified SCORE member. Why is she here as a part of a volunteer mentoring? SCORE has started a partnership with Texas Department of Emergency Management to begin educating businesses as to why they need continuity plans, emergency plans, disaster plans. And she was very upfront. She said, I'll probably learn a lot from the panel members, but the neat part is their organization is trying to reach a segment across the state that is usually the strongest impact. She gave me some statistics the other day that were interesting because they matched what I had already experienced. Most of you may not realize that at the demise of the Twin Towers on 9/11, after that, 74% of all businesses that were in those towers never reopened. Most of it was because they did not have a contingency plan to deal with disasters and business continuity. We have Mr. Keith Kiplinger. He is the fire chief here at Nacogdoches. Good friend of mine. It goes way back 30. I couldn't believe it. It said 30 years. I was like,
because we're old, Bob.
No. He's what we call triple qualified. He's a firefighter, a paramedic, and a licensed law enforcement. He's been with Nacogdoches as chief since 2006. He serves also as the coordinator for the fire mutual aid for the state of Texas. It's called TIFMAS. So Keith stays busy, particularly during the hot, dry seasons that we're headed into right now. He's worked for the cities of Dickinson, Nacogdoches, Nacogdoches County, and the Baylor College of Medicine. Got his BA in Public Safety Management from St. Edward's in Austin. He's married to a flight attendant with Southwest and is the father of a freshman at the other great university in Texas other than Stephen F. Austin. Any Aggies in here? So, at Texas A&M. So it's good to have him with us. Mr. Patrick Castillo is the Sales Marketing Manager and Disaster Recovery Specialist with ServPro for Lufkin and Nacogdoches. He's a neat guy. I haven't known him but about a year and a half. He is full of energy. He wakes up every morning taking his 15-hour energy drink before he hits the ground running. He has been with ServPro for the last 9 years, and he has several certifications through the Institute of Inspection, Cleaning, and Restoration, including Certified Water Restoration Tech, Applied Structural Drying Tech, and believe me, that's a big deal. My brother is in risk management, so I get to hear all about it when they don't do it right. Fire and Smoke Restoration Tech, HAZWOPER 40, and OSHA 10. He and his teams have done disaster recovery in 28 states, traveling over 36,000 miles. The neat part about having a large national contractor like that is they can pull resources from wherever they need to. And his team, his large loss response team, was recognized as the Disaster Recovery Team of the Year last year. So I think what I'm hoping you'll see is you have probably the most balanced approach to disasters and disaster continuity or business continuity that you could ever have. I put together a pool of questions, but I'm going to tell you this. We have a small enough group that as we go through, if you would like to ask or inject a specific question to what they're discussing, feel free to raise your hand. Let me call on you if you don't mind. And let's get as much out of this as we can. How many of you are small business owners or you're at the management level? You count, by the way. Okay, so everybody here basically has a vested interest in this subject because you recognize that with the seasons that we've been through and with the disasters that we've been through, how many of you were living here when Hurricane Rita came through? And then 3 years later, we had another Category 1. All right, so we all know how important this is. This really should be in a big room with everybody there, but we'll go with the best.
Shame on them.
Yeah, we'll go with the best of the best. So let's start with, and I'll tell you what, Patrick, I'll throw the first question to you since you were the last introduced. How's that? Everyone has heard the term ready. You know, you got ready now, you got get ready, be ready. From your viewpoint in the business world, how should a business approach the thought process in asking themselves the question? They go back to their office today and they say, am I ready? What is the thought process you would offer? And what I will ask my panelists, remember we only have 50 minutes, so kind of keep your questions, feel free to, or your answers somewhat short, feel free to throw them to other panel members.
I'm going to answer that as quickly as I can. I left everybody paddling, right? I love these slicks because they tell you exactly how to get in and get out. If you are a small business and you do not, if you're a large business and you don't have a plan of when it hits the fan of what to do, you're going to be just like one of those businesses that didn't and did not get to open, right? And so ServPro makes an emergency ready profile. It's a full-blown, ready, designed program to help you identify what you need to have in place, who needs to do it, and the best thing about it is, you know, me, and I can come and do that risk assessment at no cost for you and your business. I can help train your staff. There's an app to it as well. And so you have kind of a double-edged sword there. You can have your paper folder on file. Hey, everybody in the office knows where to get it when something happens. Or you can have your app on your phone. But here's a crazy question. Who in here knows when they go to their office and they walk in, there's water coming out of the building, where to go shut off the water? Right, raise your hand. Okay, so the rest of you, you're walking around for hours and hours trying to figure it out. So one of the neat things is, and man, and this is worth gold, right? So we will, part of the program is to identify your water shut off, your gas shut off. Very simple, map it out, and it's in your program, right? So if you have safety meetings, you know, monthly, the people come in and come out, right? And so make sure that, hey, everybody knows, yep, we went over widget A of the safety meeting. Yep, everybody knows this, everybody knows that, everybody knows who to call, and this, that, and the other.
Okay, very good. I'm going to chunk it back down here, though, to the public sector, who also has to deal with this. Pete, what would you say? What would be your input? What should they be thinking of?
So I guess let me frame that by explaining a little bit about what in the public sector fire service we do. We cover kind of all hazards, right? We go from hazardous materials to fires to medical emergencies. This year we'll respond in Nacogdoches to about 4,800 disasters this year. The vast majority of those are one person having a heart attack or one person with a broken leg. But in their world, that is an absolute disaster, right? If you fall off a ladder and break your leg today, it is a disaster. It wrecks your whole world. So our job really has three phases. Mitigation, which is preparedness. It is prevention, trying to keep people from hurting themselves, trying to keep people from burning things down. And that mitigation piece never stops. We do it 12 months a year, 365 days. We have the response piece, which even at 4,800 calls in a year, that's the very smallest piece of what we do is the emergency response. At 4 o'clock in the morning when we respond to contractors where their building's on fire. And then the last piece is recovery. And we play a really kind of an unusual role in recovery because we dance around the edges. People like ServPro and other companies like that spend a lot of time doing recovery work and helping you. So my job as the fire chief, though, is to make sure that when we respond to those 4,800 disasters a year, we don't have a crisis ourselves. We want to make sure we do it safely, we do it effectively, that our people are trained, that when we get there and your leg is broken, we know what to do. The first person there knows what to do. So how do we start that? When we onboard new employees, they're already trained firefighters and EMTs, but they spend 6 months in a field training program where they go station to station. And the very first lesson they learn is where's the water shut off, where's the gas shut off, and how do I pull the power to the fire station? So out of all of our firefighters know exactly where to go if we start flooding a fire station. In your business, a fire may be a very, very unlikely event. It probably won't happen to any of you. But when it does, it's a really big event, right? But if you own a restaurant and somebody Snapchats a roach running across the table in your restaurant and it goes viral, that is a way bigger crisis, right? So what have you done to mitigate that ahead of time? What have you done to prepare for the day that that happens in your restaurant? What have you done to prevent that from happening in your restaurant? So let's think about the restaurant scenario. We take that, how do we do to prepare for it, or to prevent it, right? Let's start with prevention. That's an easy one. We get a pest control company that comes around pretty regularly. We do inspections. We clean our kitchen. We get our vent hoods clean. We pull the stove out and get all that funky stuff out from behind it, right? And we do all those things to try to make sure we don't have roaches running across the table. And so we do a big prevention piece. And most of our restaurants here in Nacogdoches do a really good job of preventing that from happening. But what happens when it does happen? If you're the owner of the restaurant and you're out of town, how does the 19-year-old high school or college student that's on duty that night deal with that emergency when you're on a cruise and you can't answer your phone? And does that little roach running across the table become a huge deal that causes you to go out of business? And have you thought that through? So you have to individually think about what are your risk factors. For us, the risk factors are we drive through a red light and somebody runs into us and we hurt somebody, and that fire truck can't go to the original emergency because we have to stop at the new emergency. We want to prevent that crisis from happening. And we want to create keep a disaster from happening within the disaster. And so that's sort of our idea.
Okay? So, Sue, let me give this to you because there have been two very concurrent, but it's kind of like a railroad track, two different sides of the track. And you're working at it from a different area, working with TDM, or Texas Department of Emergency Management. First of all, kind of make sure that they understand what SCORE is and where they plug in, but where does SCORE see this preparation or this disaster planning from your viewpoint, particularly working with small businesses?
Thanks for that. So nobody here's heard of SCORE. That's shame on us. So we're a national organization of 10,000 plus volunteers who offer mentoring and education free to the public. We have an overhead staff of 13 people in Herndon, Virginia. And within Houston's chapter, we have 14 offices and 140 volunteers. And we offer over 600 classes. We mentor and we educate virtually, face-to-face, email, or telephone. It's a long way to get here, so if you want to call us up, we're happy to help you out. But their office is also in Dallas. But with respect to this particular subject, our volunteers cover all of the disciplines of business, and we're volunteers with real-world experience who just have a passion for small business. And we feel like it's our civic duty to help you build resilience so that you don't go through this horrible trauma that Sandy has gone through. This is terrible. Accidents do happen. That's a given. But I'm someone who hates crisis. I like to be proactive. And as the fire chief here was talking about, if you're a little proactive, you can avoid a lot of heartache, in particular, going out of business, okay? So what we're doing is, there's a lot of information out there to help you plan, help you mitigate, help you prepare your staff. You're worried about life-saving, which is your employees, who are really the resource of your business. Luckily for Sandy, the fire was at night, okay? Those of you, if anyone here is in a daycare center or a school situation, anywhere that has a lot of people, you need to be really on it on knowing those emergency steps so that you can evacuate people immediately, right? You need to have those emergency contacts for that. So what we're trying to do, though, is look at it from a total business standpoint. So you have the emergency preparedness. In addition to people, you have to have it financially. My mother-in-law flooded, okay? Thank God, CERPRO, because we figured it out. Resources dried up real fast in Houston to get one of these guys in, and I thought, well, if I get a franchise, they'll bring somebody in, right? But she had FEMA insurance, NFIP, but I did tell the people we are waiting and ready with our check in hand. We got somebody that day. And every day you wait on a flood, there's more damage. So by having that preparedness financially, you are in a stronger position. And cash is the lifeblood of a business. All of your insurance, none of it covers payroll. You need to have 3 months of payroll in cash. So what we're trying to do is, we know you don't have a lot of time. We know you don't have a lot of resources. So what we're trying to do is help you do a simplified business plan. And if you have done this work, then you can recover more quickly. And we're doing it using a checklist format. I'm not telling you it's not a pain in the neck, because it is. But documentation is your life. Being able to prove to NFIP that you really have that piece of furniture, or you really have that computer, and you know how much it costs because you have that receipt, and you've stored it in the cloud, and you can access it from anywhere, crucial. Having the lifeblood of your business so that your employees can work virtually while your business is down, crucial. Put it in the cloud. I went to the cybersecurity guys. Lock it down, but put it in the cloud. Because that's also a disaster. You know, these are all disasters, and you need to be, you know, there are two things about business, and the problem with small business people is you're like, well, the best part is that you have this wonderful ability to take air and turn it into something that the rest of us can enjoy. That's such a gift, okay? It's such a gift, but you always look at the glass is not half full for you, it's 3/4 full, right? And the purpose of this is to tell you bad things can happen. The shuttle can fall down from the sky, and he's telling me I'm done. So, no, but you know, so you need to play defense. There are two sides on the football team, right? So let's play both sides so that you're stronger. 40% of businesses fail immediately. 75% without a continuity of operation plan fail in 3 years. And that's a national statistic. So it's not us just trying to scare you.
And that's a fact. That's a fact. Now, let's take, Sandy, you've been able to hear kind of what they've said, and you lived through this. As a matter of fact, you're probably living through some of what she's just been talking
Still living
about.
through it.
Why don't you take a minute and tell them, in the simple steps you told me that morning, what happened, but more importantly, what's been happening, so they get a real live, here's what can happen.
Okay, well, I got a call on December 21st, first from our alarm service, and they said the alarm was going off, and then about 5 minutes later, they said, there's a fire behind your office, and then about 5 minutes later, they said, the fire department's there, we need to code your gate. And so my husband and I took off, and not expecting this, we did not have an emergency plan, but the fire department was already there, and they had cut a hole in the side of the building and were putting water in it. And you know, that's just, I mean, you're not ever ready for that. But I have learned an awful lot. I will say that the fire department in Nacogdoches was wonderful. We have been really blessed because we were able to save our data. Our cloud backup had partially failed, but the Nacogdoches Fire Department assigned me a fireman that went in and got some things out of the office because it did not completely burn. And that's all he did that morning, because they told me, they said, we're gonna flood your building, so if there's anything you need, and I couldn't even think, you know, but I called my office manager and I said, what do I need to get? She said, the checkbook, the flash drive off my desk, the computers, you know, and I was just, and sending him in, and they got all of our computers out, and we were able to save our server. It happened to be in a room that got the least amount of heat and the least amount of smoke. Now, we did have to respond really fast. You know, I had an IT guy on staff. Well, he wears several hats, but he just took the computers and took them to his garage and put cat litter out and took all the hard drives out. And I don't really know what he did, but he saved a lot for us, and so we were very blessed in that respect. The problem, you know, that I had was that I am attached to paper, and so we had not gone electronic, and not complete. So we had a lot of things backed up, but we have a lot of paper that's not anywhere electronic. It's just a hard copy. We were able to take our filing cabinets out because the building did not completely burn, and we were able to store them, and we can go find things. They smell really bad, but they're there. But that's another thing. It's forced us to go electronic. We're in the process now of scanning all of that old stuff. I wish we had done it earlier, sooner, but that's a lesson we've learned. The backup thing, I never dreamed that it would, you know, that a cloud-based
Why don't you
thing
tell
fail.
them why though, because I think that's an important factor.
Well,
Because a lot of us, we just see email come through and we don't pay that much attention to it.
apparently, it had not completely backed up. Some months before that, it only got 40% or 60%, and we were sent emails supposedly, but we never got the emails or saw them, or they went to the spam box. I'm really not sure, but we didn't have a complete backup. But we did have our server, and we were able to take the server information off and put it on a new server. So, you know, I just kind of went, there's so much to do. The first thing I thought was, I've got to get a place for these people to work. We've got to make payroll on Friday. I've got to have a computer, and I've got to have my accounting going, you know, and we've got to have payroll checks. And so there was just an awful lot going on. I would say use your resources. There were people in the community that came to our aid. There were people that offered, the chamber offered us to use their facilities if we needed them. We had to make a lot of decisions really quickly about where we were going to relocate. A lot of the guys were working out in the field, and they could still work, but my office people, I knew I had to get them a place to work. They were just lost, you know, they didn't know what to do. So I delegated. I mean, I sent this one to the store to get 3 computers, you know, I sent, this one was working on our data, you know, and this one to get office supplies, and it all just kind of came together, but it has been an experience.
Okay, now, believe it or not, we're about halfway through our time.
I'm sorry.
And we kind of, no, that's perfect, but this is a good point to say. We've talked a little bit of the strategic, moving into the tactical. Are there any questions from the audience at this point that you'd like to, you thought about you'd like to ask before I move on? Anybody? Okay, because once again, very participatory here. I'm going to address this one to both Keith and Patrick. Let's kind of move into the tactical area, meaning let's apply what we're planning. How often should a business kind of do a walkthrough to see, does what I see on paper match what I think I see here? And what should they be looking for as they do that? Because you'll both kind of approach this. Keith, I'll let you go first this time.
So I guess I have 2 pieces that I would cover with regard to that. First of all, the most important thing that you can instill in your teams is critical thinking and problem solving skills. When something really bad happens, oftentimes you don't have what it was that you thought you needed. So if you break your femur, we use a device called a hair traction splint, and we stretch your leg out, right? Do you know how many times I've opened up the femur bag and there's not any little Velcro thing that goes around your ankle, and you can't? So if you don't have those critical thinking and problem solving skills, you just lock up because you don't have all the tools you need. And I think that's the case in any of our businesses. And so making sure that even the employees that have a very limited role or a very limited function have the ability to think their way out of problems and challenges, and I think that's really crucial. And that's the number one thing I would suggest. The next thing is that you need to have all of your team engaged in the process of figuring out what can go wrong in your particular event. I can't tell you how many hundreds of times I've done CPR. It's in the hundreds, maybe 1,000. I don't know. I've been doing this 30 years. I have no idea. I can tell you how many times I was stuck by a needle. It was once, and it was in 1991. I know that, right? I never did CPR on myself, but the needle went inside me, right? So I think that was a disaster in my world, right? And I got gamma globulin shots, and it was in the heart of the AIDS crisis. We did all sorts of kind of crazy things back then, of over-medicating us and making us sick to try to not catch some diseases. And Bob's laughing because he remembers, because he was probably getting the shots with me.
No, thank goodness.
So, but I mean, I think that's important. So each one of your team members are going to bring a little bit of a different perspective, right? And I'm a little bit sensitive to needle sticks because it happened to be one time. I've never broken my leg climbing out the back of an ambulance, but I did stick a needle in my leg climbing out the back of an ambulance. So I'm looking for that, right? And so I have a different perspective than, say, Sandy Cox would. And even bringing in somebody that's not a part of your team. You know, one of the things that we do quite often with our business owners is do a walkthrough with them, not a fire inspection where we're trying to find them doing things wrong, but just pointing out things that they could take a look at and that might be helpful so that they can try to mitigate those disasters before the disaster happens. So,
Okay, Patrick?
How many business or companies or whatever, how many do you go to your safety meetings once a quarter, once a month? Who has those? Who's ever gone to a safety meeting in the last month? Raise your hand. Okay, so there's one. Okay. So in planning, right, safety who's had to go to a meeting to know, I don't know, where to park or how to send an email or something, right? If safety is not written down as part of your intent, then don't be surprised when something happens and you don't know how to react to it, okay? The best way to get your entire staff involved is to plan it, schedule it, and do it, right? This is a way everybody in your organization can touch on the importance of safety, right? So like in our industry, it's 100 plus for many, many days, and we've got men and women out in the field, and so guess what we get to talk to them about for 6 minutes in the morning meetings? Stay hydrated, make sure all your buckets are full, make sure you've got enough ice, this, that, and the other. If you get hot, right, because we go into close quarters, take a break, cool down, right? Because if they get dehydrated and they pass out, guess who we got to call, right? And then that, right, that shuts the whole day down, this, that, and the other. One of the things is having when something happens, we lose our mind. We don't know this, that, and the other. I hand these out. These are do's and don'ts, right? And so it's always neat to have somebody in the office is the expert on something. Hey, this happened. What should we do? Oh, well, hey, don't do this, or hey, don't do that. What was you asked something else.
I think it was all one question. You did well.
Okay.
It's more of the walkthrough, what they would be looking for, that would help them at the moment. Because what a lot of businesses do is what they, and Keith and I have experienced this even in the public sector, we put it on paper, but does it really match what we see in real life? And I think y'all have both done a good job of doing that. Now, one of the things that I want to reiterate to the audience, I didn't give my background, but other than insinuating 43 years, but Homeland Security, law enforcement, paramedic. I love Keith to death, but I've noticed rats and roaches run out of burning buildings, they never run in. So God bless them, I'm glad they're here. But I've done a good bit of planning and work with businesses, particularly outside of this area, on the very topic we're talking about. Folks, I hope you're listening because you're getting some good information here today, both directly and then indirectly through the experiences of what Sandy has had to deal with. One thing I do want to kind of turn the corner on, because this is something that a lot of businesses, I think, take for granted. Let's talk a moment about insurance, business continuity. You've mentioned NFIP. Is NFIP still available in this area? I'm not sure. Okay. We need to explain that. And let's talk about what you need to be asking your insurance agent. Let me tell you why this is critical. There's a good friend of mine sitting in this room that knows that he may end up being employed because so many people assume that their insurance policy says something when what they forget to do is check two different sections. And Patrick, I'll let you touch on those and pass it to Sue because I'd like you to mention NFIP and let's talk through what that is and what their access to it is, if you two would.
That's what I was gonna add. When was the last time you did a business review with your insurance agent? If you haven't done it in a year, that is way too long. How many know and have your insurance agent's number on speed dial? All right, so there's one. All right. There is no shortage of insurance agents in the area. Okay? There is no shortage. So, and that's what I was going to add to it. I meet people at the worst time in their life, right? They have gone through, their business is burned down, their business has been flooded, their house is burned down, the house has been flooded, and they don't know what to do. And then I get to be the bearer of bad news and say, great, you know what, I can bill your insurance company, I can do all these fine things because I've got all these fantastic contracts and service agreements. But guess what? They all are written if you have insurance coverage for it, okay? So if your business, let's say you're gonna need to shut your doors for a period of time. You have business interruption, right? That's an important thing to ask. How much, right? You still gotta make the payroll, you gotta do all these things. And so, and again, it's just data. Half of the businesses that have crisis do not open, okay? And so the thing that you want to know is, have I talked to my insurance person? Am I covered? Do I have that information on my phone or tablet or whatever? Do I know what my declaration page says? Because if, and trust me, they want to sell you everything. And it's just a couple of bucks, right? A couple of bucks extra a month. But I can tell you, and when when you call and say, hey, you know what? When I hear NFIP, I go, okay, I'm gonna get 60 cents on the dollar, this, that, and the other. But when she says, hey, you know what? I've got cash money, I can pay for my loss. Then guess what? Yep, I'm gonna come and help you first, right? I'm coming, and I'm not the bad guy, but guess what? You have somebody who planned, and I would much rather, as a vendor, work with a group who's made a plan than someone who hasn't. And then one last thing, when you're choosing that vendor, make sure that they can provide a certificate of liability insurance. Okay? So just like they want you to be insured, you should want them to be insured. Right? Because then make sure they have, especially for your business, that you just don't get somebody in a truck to show up and leave you high and dry.
So, you know, he's talking about insurance, and I'm going to tell you, buy insurance. Okay? There are 4 people that you really want to love in life. They're called bail, your banker, your accountant, your insurance agent, and your lawyer. If you're in business, they're your bail. And that insurance agent, he's the guy. He's the guy. And when it comes to insurance, okay, you have the insurance that private insurance companies can provide. And then the only people who provide insurance for rising water are the National Flood Insurance Policy. Everybody calls them FEMA. It's not really FEMA. FEMA is the organization that manages all disasters. But NFIP, National Flood Insurance Program, are the guys, the only people you can buy flood insurance from. So if that's from a hurricane, or the Memorial Day flood, or the flood that happened on the 7th of May, when 15 inches of rain fell in Sugar Land, and I was trying to drive home, okay? That's the only people that pay for that. And it's a lot of money from a business standpoint, but it's a great investment. We had another small business person who had been flooded 3 times. Right, it's a bakery in Houston, a very famous bakery, and they were part of the workshop that Tina put on for us. And she said, you take your insurance policies, you get yourself a highlighter, and you go through those policies line by line, and you highlight everything there until you understand what's there. When you're talking about the ways you can recover from insurance, okay, if you own the structure, they pay for the structure. Let me tell you something when it comes to documentation. You need to know the square footage on that structure. If you have the floor plan, go and scan it at FedEx, put it in a PDF, put it in the cloud. If you don't have the floor plan on it, you can get it from your tax appraiser because you're paying tax on it, right? That's a third-party endorsement. So the structure, the contents, that would be the chairs in the room. The structure matters because you want to pay for the carpet again and the walls that they ripped out up to the 4-foot mark, right? You got to be able to pay for it. That's all structure. Equipment, it covers that. At this facility, they've got a kitchen. You got a lot of expensive equipment in here. All right? Continuity of operations, business interruption, right? You got to pay for that. I always forget the fifth one. They're five.
But I will reiterate something because I'm dealing with this in another world regarding churches and liability on some things in disaster planning. What she just said about talking to the agent and go line by line. I actually developed 7 questions with the assistance of a risk manager and attorney that I hand to churches when they say, oh yeah, we've got coverage, we've got coverage. And I said, ask these 7 questions, and if they are all yes, by the way, not only are you in good shape, but let me know who that insurance company is because I'm fixing to send them a lot of business. So far, I'm batting 100%, not no, but no. Okay? So make certain that they, even if, do not take a term for granted. Rising water from a flood is different from rising water because your
Hot water
heater.
heater. Yeah.
They
Hot
look
water
at it differently.
heater is, you know, that's not a flood.
Yeah. See, speak to the emotional impacts that your business has had to deal with. Because we've all talked the structural, we've talked the physical, but there's also an emotional impact. There's a human impact. What would they be looking at? What would they need to think about? And Patrick's even talked about it. We said your brain goes into freeze or whatever.
It does?
It really does. And Sue asked me if I'd even recovered yet, and it's been 8 months. I'm not sure that I have. I'm still on crisis mode, you know. But yes, there's this, you know, a sense of loss, and like I said before, my employees kind of feel lost. They don't know what to do. They don't know where to go. They don't know how to help. And so I found, of course, I kind of just go in crisis mode naturally anyway, I guess, but just giving them has to do, help, and to restore the normalcy, some type of normalcy to them so that they have a place to work and a computer to look at. And so that was probably the first thing after I called my insurance agent that I did was start working on temporary place for them to work. And there's a whole host of decisions you have to make about that, and you have to make them really fast. And and I got input from them, from my employees, because it was going to impact them. It had impacted them as much as it had me, and just reassuring them that we are going to continue, that we're going to survive this, that we're in good shape, we have good insurance, and we're going to get back to normal. It may take a while, but we're going to get there.
I would address one other point with that. To date, or to this point, we've talked mostly about natural disasters or fire. I've done a good bit of work in the area of violence in the workplace, seminars and stuff for over 25 years. The statistics are, depending on what study you look at, if you have a violent incident, it doesn't have to be a shooting, a violent incident at your business, if you do not have a mitigation or a response plan in place for the emotional impact, i.e. you at least know a counselor in town that you can get on site, your odds are that somewhere between 14 and 18 months you'll have up to a 72% turnover. Now, how many of you can afford that? You know, so just keep that in mind too as you're going along.
Can I just add one more thing? You know, we went through Harvey in Houston, and it was incredibly overwhelming. The way finances go is there's public assistance for individuals, there's public assistance for public infrastructure, but there is no public assistance for small businesses. And that's why TDEM's working with us on this. But people would call in, right? And their business had been flooded, and they needed a loan. And they were dealing with the issues surrounding the loss, which is, as Sandy was saying, incredibly emotional, and from a critical thinking standpoint, incredibly intense. And then the whole issue around an SBA loan, there's so many rules and regulations on that, they were having a hard time processing whether that was even a good decision, okay? Because if you get an SBA loan and you have flood insurance, SBA takes the first lien on your property, right? And the minute NFIP starts paying out, it doesn't go to you. You haven't grown the amount of money you just got. It goes straight to the SBA, right? And so they were just having such a difficult time understanding that because they're overwhelmed. I mean, think of how overwhelming the worst day of your life was, and try processing how you're going to come back. So you have to make plans for this. Just one other thing I wanted to say, just one other thing. Please make sure that what you report to the IRS is accurate. True story, there was a shrimper with a $1 to $2 million shrimp boat in Katrina, and he was reporting $60,000 in income, and when he went, he lost his boat. When he went to get a loan, didn't qualify, right? Because the money doesn't show right. That shocked me, but you know, people do these things, so.
Imagine that, right?
Yeah.
All right, here's what I'd like to do as we're kind of approaching it. Let's just start with you, Keith, and all of you, from your experience, if you were to tell them, you're walking out of that door at the end of this, it's over, what are the top 2 or 3 actions or activities you think you would advise them to do starting today or this week? Let's have them walk out with tools in their tool belt that are actionable.
So the first one is mirror a disaster in the way you do business every day. So to tell you how we do it. If you're going to be a local organization and you want to bring 20,000 people to downtown Nacogdoches, starting about 3 months before your event, we're going to start putting together a plan. And it's called an event action plan. And we're going to put together this plan, and it's 25 pages long, and it talks about the weather, and has every phone number of anybody involved. And as we get closer and closer, the event organizer, the Chamber of Commerce, you can nod your heads because you know I make you do this. But we put together this event action plan, and we do it for every single big event in our community. And every event, the people that are running the event get it, and they're in charge of the event. We're not commanding the event, but we have a plan for what we're going to do for medical, what we're going to do for heat exhaustion, what we're going to do for if we need to distribute water, what we're going to do if there's an active shooter. And we do that for that event. Well, the reason we do that, and the way that we do it, is we do it exactly the same way as if there's a hurricane coming. We do an incident action plan that looks exactly the same, that's the same forms and the same paperwork and the same everything else. Every time there's a hurricane in the Gulf, and we do one every 12 hours. Well, what I've created now is a situation where Barbara Hall can come and work in my emergency operations center because she knows the plans, she knows the format, she knows how they look, and she's used to helping us put them together. And so the community now becomes part of the emergency response. And so we treat everyday business just like it was a disaster. So let's go back to the roach running across the table thing. You're the restaurant owner. What do you do with your social media? What do you tell your employees with regard to social media? Somebody puts it out on Snapchat and it ends up on Instagram, and then it's all over Facebook where the old people are looking at it, and now you're really in trouble. You huddle your 12 employees together, and what do you tell them about social media? You don't put anything on your social media without me seeing it first. We've got to get a handle on this, right? Because you go into crisis mode. Sandy says, this stops. We're not putting anything about this roach on social media. I want to see it first. Why in the world would you let your employees put stuff on social media about your business before the crisis? Maybe you should have that. So maybe you should treat every day just like you would treat it after the crisis. And that's a pretty simple explanation. But if you simply think through that, what does a crisis look like to you? What is something really bad that could really damage you, your reputation, or your ability to provide services, or your ability to pay your employees? What does that look like? And why is it important? And if you explain to your employees that if a roach runs across the table, you don't get paid next week. Nobody's going to tip you. That becomes kind of real. The next thing is train and involve your whole team. You don't have to spend any money on this stuff. You can go buy insurance and all that. All those things are wonderful. But you can do a little bit by just involving your entire team and training them a little bit. Stop by the local fire station and say, could you come up with a list of the top 10 things that we need to look for that would make our business more safe? And then once every 6 months, get your whole team together and just walk through. Because if somebody comes in my office, they're going to see things that I don't see. The little smudge near the light switch, and you quit seeing it a year ago, but Bob walks into your house and he sees it and smells that you have a dog. And you go, wait a minute, I have a dog? I didn't even know. So train and involve the whole team and let everybody be involved in every piece of this. I bet at the Expo Center, you have employees that have never been in a mechanical room. Some of the people that work in the office may have never been in an air handler room, and they don't know what's in there or what it does.
We all know.
Okay, you all do.
But not enough.
But there's probably
Not
a lot of
enough.
people that don't in other places.
Yeah, and one of the things that just reminded me this week, I got a phone call, I wasn't at the office, and I got a phone call that one of our panic veterans was going off. So I called the office to find, because they were calling and no one was answering, so I called a cell phone and said, hey, y'all okay? And they were like, yeah. And I said, well, one of the panic buttons are going off. And Karen says, no, I don't even know where they are. I've been shown, but I don't know where they all are. I forgot. So I'm thinking, we need to go back over and remind everybody where those panic buttons are.
Yep, even from a safety standpoint.
Right.
So that's it. Act every day like you had a disaster. Train and involve the whole team in the whole process. And the last thing is to reach out. Mary Machniak is the head of the apartment association. If you have rental property in Nacogdoches, you need to be in her club, because once a month they get together and they have lunch. And you know who's a member? ServPro. You know who else is a member? Some insurance folks. And Mary is a source of a contact. And if your apartment has a crisis, you've got to reach out pretty quickly and start finding places. If you burn an apartment building, we got to find places for those people to live. How are those apartments doing that? Because they reach out to Mary, and Mary says, I know that Cambridge Court has some space, and they facilitate that. So reach out to those organizations. The Chamber of Commerce is another great place, because you can reach across the aisle and do that disaster planning. If you don't have a relationship with a contractor ahead of time, before you have an emergency, you're making a mistake. So you ought to get Sandy Cox's business card, because and she won't say that they're amazing. They do great work, and they're very quick, and they're always in town, and they're always doing everything they can. And when you have the disaster, the quicker you get the contractor on board, the quicker you're back in business. And the quicker you get done fighting with your insurance company, because they're not going to agree with what her price is. And she's going to have to help you provide the documentation to do that. And so reaching out. The last thing is, everybody here goes to church, or they have a kid in the Girl Scouts, or you have some kind of social activity, right? And part of that reaching out, you reach out by joining these organizations, reach out by finding people that are members of the Chamber of Commerce that can help you, but also reach out. You have a firefighter that goes to your church. There's a police officer that has a kid in your daughter's Girl Scout troop, and they'll be happy to come help you. Because you know them on a social level, they'll be happy to come help you and just walk through things with you. Hey, what happens if a guy with a gun shows up at my insurance office? What do I do? And that police officer will be happy to help. So I'm sorry I got that
No,
long.
that's fine. Great information, Sandy.
One thing I didn't mention was, one of the things that took me the longest time to do was inventory our contents.
That was the other thing that they called
What?
inventory.
I wish that I had pictures, and pretty regular, I would have taken pictures of every office, every closet, because it's so hard to remember all that stuff. And there's still things today that come up, and I'm like, oh, yeah, that was in the fire. I didn't even put that on the inventory list. Check your insurance limits for sure. Be sure you have insurance to cover temporary facilities. I don't know what to call it exactly. And we had insurance that covered document recreation. I'm not exactly sure what the term for that is either. And then, of course, backing up and going electronic. I think that's the biggest lesson that I've learned is I should have done that years ago.
Very good. Sue?
The biggest thing I think is really do due diligence in your documentation. Make sure that your accounts are up to date. You don't have time to reconcile your accounts. You are going into full crisis mode when this happens, so keep everything up to date. Take photographs of everything. If you have a point of sale system, that will probably help you with your insurance. Not everybody has that, depending on the type of business you're in. But analyze your suppliers. You know, make sure that when you look at your suppliers that you have alternatives outside of where the disaster is. So make sure that you're not sole source and then you can't get supplies to go back into business. And make sure that your suppliers that you may think there are multiple suppliers of it, that they aren't sole sourced. Apparently there was I think it was an immunization that was being manufactured in Puerto Rico, and there were the ones in the country that didn't.
Yep.
We couldn't get it.
That's right.
So, you know, make sure that's there. So financial preparedness, financial strength. Be like this with your insurance agent. Build relationships with contractors, you know, the dumpster people, and the people that empty the dumpsters. That's important too. The hardest thing to find in Houston was storage facilities. So if you are in a normally flood-prone area, which is, you know, a situation for us, you need to pay attention to that. But, you know, document and photograph. And those photographs need to be updated annually.
Okay,
So.
very good. Patrick, you have 2 minutes.
All right. Briefly, I tell you what,
2
everybody
minutes,
on
briefly.
this panel, you've got a great community of resources available to you guys. Whether it be the fire department, vendors like myself, the chamber, somebody you know, right? An easy way to get started is this thing that SERP programs, right? The CRP profile. Everything that everybody talked about is available in a short little easy bake oven recipe for you guys to do. Do safety meetings if you've never had them. Start doing them because they save lives, they save equipment, they save a business. And finished in under 2 minutes.
Very good. You did. I'll give you your reward. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for participating. Has this information been helpful to you?
Yes.
Now, here's the biggest thing I'd like you to do, other than thanking them, is go out and do something with it.
All right,
Okay.
and I've got some giveaways for you. I think it's similar to his. Ours is an employee go kit, and on the back is a small business go kit. If you do this, you'll have done most of your documentation.
All right. Would you give them a round of applause? Thank you.